Hi, this is Denise, reading to you this week's edition of the Cape Cod Chronicle, dated Thursday, September 12th, 2024. On the front page, Refuge to Remove Dead Trees, Dozens of Morris Island Endanger Navigation by Tim Wood Chatham. Over the summer, crews hired by the town removed at least 60 dead trees from the navigation channel between Morris Island and Monomoy. Dozens more trees ripped from the shore by erosion continue to litter the large tidal flats just east of Crescent Beach, just offshore from property owned by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Next week, crews from the federal agency will attempt to clear-cut as many of the trees as possible, bringing in heavy equipment to haul, cut up, and chip and sand and waterlogged stumps. Anything that's been uprooted and dead, we're hoping to remove, said Grace Williamson, project leader of the Eastern Massachusetts National Wildlife Refuge Complex, which includes the Monomoy National Wildlife Refuge. Crews recently widened the refuge right-of-way off of Tisquantum Road to its full width of about 30 feet to allow access by skid steers, chippers, and other equipment. Depending on conditions and the ability to chainsaw or chip apart the dead trees, the material hauled off the flats will be trucked out with the assistance of the town's Department of Public Works. Many of the details won't be certain until crews get on site and can assess the situation. The work is scheduled to get underway next Monday, September 16th, and continue for most of the week. Town and fish and wildlife officials were scheduled to brief homeowners in the area on the plans today. The refuge hiking trails will be closed to the public while the work is ongoing. Significant erosion in front of 4 homes along Tilpini Run caused the failure of the revetment at 97 Tilpini Run last year, sending dozens of trees into the water. The Monomoy Refuge property just west of the revetment is also under attack by erosion, with high tides killing many trees and the swift current dragging them onto the flats and into the channel. The erosion caused the high-profile loss of all the buildings at the refuge headquarters to the east, but the losses to the refuge property to the west, which hosts salt marsh, hiking trails, and many threatened and endangered species, while less visible to the public, are no less significant. The refuge has lost a total of 6 acres on Morris Island, reducing its land from 40 to 34 acres. And while most of the refuge migratory bird nesting happens on the offshore North and South Monomoy Islands, 2 pairs of federally endangered piping plovers nested in the eroded area this summer, producing 4 chicks. It's also become more heavily used by the public since beach access at the headquarters property was lost. Funds remaining from the demolition of the visitor center and office building in April will be used to cover the cost of the tree work. It's all about navigation safety, she said. And although that's not generally within the Fish and Wildlife Service's mission, the agency is working with the town in good faith effort to address the problem. Harbor Master Jason Holmes said there were 1 or 2 reports this summer of boaters striking objects in the area, but nothing major. The town contracted with several local boaters and fishermen to remove the trees posing the most immediate danger. He estimated they removed at least 60 trees. They did a good job keeping the channel clear, he said. The initial work was funded by the town, but the owner of 97 Tilpini Run pledged $10,000 to support the effort, according to Natural Resources Director Greg Berman. He expects the collaboration with Fish and Wildlife Service to continue. Erosion in this area is expected to continue, and many dead trees remain standing on National Wildlife Refuge property, Berman wrote in an email. In the short term, our focus is on removing trees that pose an immediate danger to our waterways. The town will continue to work with the agency on a long-term solution, he said. A long-term plan to install temporary fans just offshore in that area as a way to lessen shoaling in the Morris Island Channel. The nearby Stage Harbor entrance channel is still in the permitting stages, and the highly dynamic nature of the area means its future is unpredictable. It's a high-energy area. Meanwhile, work on rebuilding the revetment at 97 Tilpini Run is scheduled to begin soon after being on hiatus for the summer. Last week, the Conservation Commission approved a final permit for the project, which will include the use of barge offshore to help place huge boulders to hold the revetment in place. The next front page story. Monkey Business. What's with the banana peels on the South Orleans Rotary? By Ryan Bray, Orleans. On a picturesque early September morning last week, the new sculpture in the center of South Orleans Rotary glistened in the warm sunshine. Beneath it, banana peels sat strewn about the concrete foundation. Wait, banana peels? Really? Motorists commuting along Route 28 may have noticed some odd redecoration of the Rotary in recent weeks. Banana peels, some blackened and others a fresh yellow, could be seen around the concrete base. On Thursday of last week, about 7 peels, including a few whole bananas, could be found littering the ground. We live right down the road, so the Rotary is at an everyday passage, said Orleans resident and artist Dave Holbrook. Then I thought, this isn't just a one-off because there were fresh peels every day. But why and who was throwing them? Holbrook's curiosity was such that he announced what he'd seen to members of the Orleans Community Space Facebook page, where residents and visitors gather to discuss various happenings around town. So childish, one commentator wrote. Donkey Kong must be riding around, joked another. So he just drops them in splits, wrote another poster. Reached by phone last week, Orleans Police Chief Scott McDonald said he was unaware of the litter on the Rotary, which was deemed substantially complete back in May. Police have not yet received any calls or complaints, but McDonald said he had advised patrol officers to keep an eye on any suspicious activity in the area. As unusual as the sight of discarded peels adorning one of the most identifiable areas of town might be, there's actually a precedent for similar activity elsewhere on the Cape. In Sandwich, a small rotary known by locals as the Fruit Loop has been the site of errant peels for years. While it's anyone's guess as to what's driving such unappealing behavior, Holbrook and others have their theories. For instance, some in town have been critical of the Rotary's design, namely the extensive concrete at the base of the bronze sculpture. I assumed it was one kind of protest, Holbrook said. Meanwhile, the Orleans Improvement Association privately raised more than $400,000 to create and install Wind Dance, the 13.5-foot-tall weathered steel structure designed by Chatham artist Tom Odell. Nancy Jorgensen of the association said she's heard more criticism about the amount of concrete used in the new Rotary than the sculpture itself. It is disappointing and it's childish and it's unfortunate, she said, of the littering in the Rotary, adding that the association will continue to work with the town on future projects. The Rotary is under the jurisdiction of the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, but the town's Public Works Department has periodically stopped by the area to remove and dispose of the peels, said Rich Waldo, the town's Public Works Director. Ultimately, it is a state road, but we feel our obligation is to maintain it at a level acceptable by the town, he said. Meanwhile, persons caught littering at the Rotary or elsewhere in town could be penalized by fire under Massachusetts general law. Littering on or within 20 feet of a public highway or land is punishable by fines of up to $5,500 for a first-time offense and up to $15,000 for a second and each subsequent offense. Penalties also apply to coastal or inland waters and lands dedicated for open space purposes, including lands subject to conservation restrictions and agricultural preservation restrictions as defined in Chapter 184. The next story. Elaine Baird aims to keep Orleans informed, by Elizabeth Van Wy. Orleans resident Elaine Baird thinks of herself as an under-the-radar person, she said recently. In her work behind the scenes as one of 2 founding advisors to the email newsletter and website Exit 89, Baird has put her passion for Orleans into shining a spotlight on what she calls the mystery of town meeting and promoting vibrant civic engagement in the town. The idea for Exit 89 came from a conversation more than 5 years ago between Baird and a group of friends on the way to an historic house tour in Sandwich. She recalled asking her fellow Orleans resident, Martha Sherrill, why she had stopped going to town meeting. The question triggered a discussion about many crucial decisions facing Orleans and the lack of information needed to make them. For some, that seemingly idle conversation would have ended there, but for Baird, it was a start of a journey to find an answer. I felt very strongly that most Orleans residents were really in the deep dark about town affairs because of the lack of communication from any media. We residents were clueless until we went to town meeting. Baird had recently been recruited to join the Orleans Finance Committee, of which he is still a member, and I quickly realized how little I knew about the reality of town governance and how fascinating it is. Cheryl suggested starting an email newsletter to address the information void of residents, which Baird immediately thought was a great idea. Baird recruited Lynn Bruneau, the Finance Committee's chair, to serve with her as a founding advisor, and Cheryl, an award-winning journalist, to serve as one of the writers. Cheryl recruited Emily Miller, another fabulous writer, Baird said, and with its 4 key volunteers in place, Exit 89 was born. Originally named Exit 12 after the exit to Orleans from Route 6, the newsletter was renamed when the state renumbered the highway exits. The first issue came out after the fall town meeting in 2020, editing infographics and tech support was provided by Kazmira Nadeau of C. Howell Bookshop, and the nonprofit Lower Cape TV was recruited as the fiscal sponsor. With its mission to provide a clear and impartial overview of key town issues, Exit 89 produces 4 newsletters a year, one before each of the town meetings covering the significant controversial issues to be addressed at the meeting, and then one after each meeting recapping decisions made. In addition, the newsletter does occasional deep dives on subjects from affordable housing to short-term rentals and the state of the water and aquifer. The complete list of issues can be found at www.exit89.org. There are more than 1,000 subscribers covering nearly 20% of the town residents. Subscriptions are free. All contributions to Exit 89 are tax deductible. Baird feels Exit 89 could be a model for other Cape towns. We are not a newspaper, she clarified. We don't do advocacy or answer further questions or get into the weeds, she stressed. Those wanting to know more or have questions, are directed to the original town source for additional information. A Massachusetts native, Baird moved to the Lower Cape, first Chatham and then Orleans in the mid-70s after graduating from NYU and Dartmouth. After teaching briefly, she began working at Tree's Place, a retail store in Orleans, which she subsequently purchased with her husband, Julian. In their 35 years as Orleans business owners, the couple traveled extensively and imported merchandise from many different countries, including Europe, Asia, Africa, and Russia. An art gallery was added in the mid-'80s, and the couple became very involved with the regional and national arts community. In addition, she served for many years as treasurer of the Orleans Chamber of Commerce and the Orleans Improvement Association. They sold the store in 2008, and Julian Baird passed away in 2015. An avid dog agility enthusiast, Baird competed with Comet, her previous dog, at 3 Westminster dog shows. Today, in her spare time, Baird and her dog, Lincoln, retired from competition, spend their time together exploring local beaches. Working to support Exit 89 has served to link Baird's 2 great loves, my passion for what a great town Orleans is, with my newfound passion for governance, she wrote. She is unabashed about her love of Orleans. She still travels wildly, especially in Europe, and finds one of her favorite parts of whatever journey she is on to be coming back and crossing the bridge to Cape Cod and returning to Orleans. This is the best of all possible worlds, she says with a smile. The next story. Brewster creates short-term rental task force. Will seek members soon, by Alan Pollock Brewster. The effort to regulate short-term rental properties might have failed to gain traction at last year's special town meeting, but the community dialogue on the issue is about to begin in earnest. This week, the Select Board created a short-term rental task force, approved the committee's charge, and announced plans to begin filling seats on the 7-member panel. Though they're a key component of the region's visitor economy, summer rentals are blamed for changing neighborhood character, stressing town infrastructure, and contributing to wastewater pollution. They also displace homes and apartments that might otherwise be used for year-round housing. Since 2019, units and homes that are rented for less than 30 days at a time must register with the state and pay a state occupancy tax. Last November, special town meeting voters indefinitely proposed 2 articles submitted by petitioner Matilda Delano, which would have required short-term rentals to register with the town for an annual fee, following special rules and limitations on the number of units owned by a single entity. Opponents said the measures required additional study, and the Select Board announced plans to do so through a special task force. The board even identified studying the issue as a key goal in its strategic plan. On Monday, Town Manager Peter Lombardi delivered the board an outline for creating the task force, which will be an ad hoc group that will hold open public meetings. The purpose, taken largely from the strategic plan, is to evaluate impacts of short-term rentals on the health, safety, and quality of life of our residents, on the local economy, and on year-round housing availability in our community. The group will specially identify goals and outcomes before evaluating and recommending policies governing rentals. I think it's important to first identify and come to a consensus on what the goals are that we want to achieve, Lombardi told the board. Only then does it make sense to develop policies that achieve these goals. It's a different approach from the petition articles, which immediately proposed policies based on ones in use by Chatham, Provincetown, and other communities. Different towns have different approaches, and so it's not clear what the task force final recommendations might look like, Lombardi said. They might also include health board regulations like Chatham's bylaw changes or zoning amendments, and would require town meeting action. Lombardi recommended that the task force pursue a strategy of board public engagement, working with key stakeholders, collecting public input, and communicating actively with residents about the ideas under consideration, making sure that we get a really good, robust, thorough public process that we're including everybody around the table. The task force will include up to 7 members, with 1 representative each from the Select Board, the Board of Health, the Affordable Housing Trust, and the Planning Board. The 3 remaining at-large members will include at least 1 person with professional background in real estate. The task force members would be appointed by the Select Board and would serve until next June 30th, with the option to reappoint members based on progress made at that point. The only thing is, I was disappointed not to see a housing partnership person on that committee, Select Board member Cynthia Bingham said. Perhaps a member of the housing partnership could serve as an at-large member. Select Board member Ned Chatelain said he approves of the deliberative approach that Lombardi proposed, identifying goals before testing possible management actions. I think that's a very important part of this process, and I'm excited to see this task force get to work. Composition-wise, this is the right balance of stakeholder, board, and committee members, Select Board member Amanda Brebrand said. But because there is also so much public interest, I think it is also really important that we have an at-large seat. Doing so will help ensure that the group considers different perspectives. It's tempting to add more at-large seats, Select Board Chair Dave Whitney said, but the large committees tend to toward the dysfunctional, Lombardi agreed, saying the 9-member panel considering the C Camp's property had difficulty identifying meeting dates when all could attend. The town manager also recommended that the task force be charged with working closely with town council to ensure that its recommendations are in line with rapidly revolving law based on recent court rulings. Staff will be reaching out to the Health Board, Planning Board, and Affordable Housing Trust to encourage them to identify members willing to serve on the task force, and the Select Board is expected to choose its own delegate at its next meeting. The town also expects to issue an invitation shortly by citizens to apply for the at-large seats. While the task force might be ready to share an overview of its plans in time for a fall special town meeting, it does not have a firm deadline and likely wouldn't have any recommendations before the next spring. That comes pretty quickly, as we all know, and it's complicated on a number of levels. The board voted unanimously, with Mary Chaffee recused to adopt the charge suggested by Lombardi. In town meetings, Chatham, Thursday, September 12th, Zoning Board of Appeals, 3 p.m. at the Annex. Monday, September 16th, Council on Aging, 9:30 a.m. at the Annex. Tuesday, September 17th, Historical Commission, 10:30 a.m., Energy and Climate Action Committee, 3:30 p.m., Select Board, 5:30 p.m., all at the Annex. Wednesday, September 18th, Affordable Housing Trust Board, 5:30 p.m. at the Annex. Thursday, September 19th, Waterways Advisory Committee, 4 p.m. at the Annex. Golf Advisory Committee, 5:30 p.m. at the Community Center. In Harwich, Thursday, September 12th, Cemetery Commission, 8 a.m. at the Community Center. Cultural Council, 4 p.m. at 204 Sisson. Finance Committee, 6 p.m., Community Preservation Commission, 6 p.m., both at Town Hall. Monday, September 16th, Select Board, 6 p.m. at Town Hall. Wednesday, September 18th, Historic District and Historical Commission, 6 p.m., Conservation Commission, 6:30 p.m., both at Town Hall. In Orleans, Thursday, September 12th, Wastewater Management Advisory Committee, 10 a.m., Nauset Room, Energy and Climate Action Committee, 4:15 p.m., Agricultural Review Committee, 6:30 p.m., both at Skakit Room. Monday, September 16th, Orleans Elementary School Committee, 3:30 p.m., Nauset Room. Tuesday, September 17th, Conservation Commission, 8:30 a.m., Nauset Room. Orleans Improvement Association, 10 a.m., Skakit Room. Select Board, 1 p.m., Nauset Room. Board of Assessors, 4 p.m., Assessor's Office, Town Hall. Snow Library, Marion Crane Gallery Committee, 4 p.m., Marion Crane Gallery Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board, 4:30 p.m., Nauset Room. Wednesday, September 18th, Open Space Committee, 9 a.m., Skakit Room. Site Plan Review Committee, 10 a.m., Board of Water and Sewer Commissions, 1 p.m., both at the Nauset Room. Zoning Bylaw Task Force, 3:30 p.m., Tonset Room. Democratic Town Committee, 5 p.m., Zoning Board of Appeals, 7 p.m., both at the Skakit Room. Thursday, September 19th, Board of Health, 2 p.m., Nauset Room. Finance Committee, 5:30 p.m., Nauset Room. Recreation Advisory Committee, 6 p.m., Skakit Room. And in Brewster, Thursday, September 12th, Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, 5 p.m., Natural Resources Advisory Committee, 6 p.m., Nauset Regional School Committee, 6 p.m., 5 Nemasket Road in Orleans. Financial Approach could decide Bridge Street project at Monday's special town meeting by Tim Wood, Chatham. Voters at Monday's special town meeting will be asked to approve $4 million to complete the waterfront project at 90 Bridge Street, but many are questioning the reliance on a previous town election vote on a different measure to authorize borrowing the Bridge Street project money. Voters at the May annual town meeting turned down an $11 million waterfront infrastructure bond article that included funding for the Bridge Street work as well as other shoreline projects. Exempting borrowing from the bond from Proposition 2.5 restrictions was approved in the annual town election that followed 2 days later. However, the Select Board agreed at the request of the Shellfish Advisory Committee to call a special town meeting to break out the Bridge Street funds from the previous waterfront infrastructure bond. Instead of seeking another ballot exemption, officials decided to rely on the previous bond approval. That's the same task officials took last year in bringing a failed annual town meeting to vote for a new senior center back to a special town meeting in the fall. Exempting the funds for the facility had also passed at the ballot box, even though the article failed. Members of several town committees have expressed their unhappiness with the process and worry that it could doom the Bridge Street vote. The 90 Bridge Street project is already underway. The project will add floats and docks for both commercial fishermen and recreational boaters at the town-owned property and includes as its centerpiece the restoration of the historic Stage Island Coast Guard boathouse and its conversion into a new shellfish growing facility to replace the 26-year-old upweller at Old Mill Boatyard. There was a sense that relying on the previous bond approval was a factor in the defeat of the senior center funding last fall, and some see the same concern coming into play with Monday's vote. It really diminishes the intent of having town meeting, resident Elaine Gibbs said at Tuesday's Select Board meeting. Going back for a second bite at the apple at town meeting while not doing the same with the ballot question adds insult to injury, she said. Select Board Vice Chair Dean Nicastro, who opposed calling Monday's special town meeting, proposed amending the town's financial policies to discourage the practice except in emergency situations. My purpose in proposing this amendment is to lay out a formal marker in the town's financial guidelines that would serve to discourage town officials from using a prior ballot approval to support a Proposition 2.5 exclusion after the associated borrowing request failed at town meeting. Nicastro said at Tuesday's board meeting, while legally permissible, that sequence goes against town traditional and hasn't been used in recent memory other than with last year's senior center vote. I believe the deviating from the traditional sequence can serve to undermine public confidence in the fiscal responsibility of town governments and should be avoided more often than not. His proposal is modest in that it is not a prohibition, so it is not to tie the hands of town officials in the future. The circumstances of the two town meeting votes relying on previous borrowing authorization were unique, board member Jeff Deacon said. I would not want a prohibition because you never know. Chair Michael Schell said the board is in a difficult position because while one segment of the electorate rejected the town meeting article, a larger number of voters approved the ballot measure. The board shouldn't ignore either vote. The 314-214 town meeting vote on the waterfront bond failed to reach the necessary 2/3 to pass. The ballot question only needed a majority to pass. The vote was 604 to 407. The board voted unanimously to refer Nicastro's proposal policy language to the Finance Committee and the town's financial advisors. Board member Shireen Davis said she wanted to know how the policy would impact the town's bond rating. Recommendations will come back to the Select Board, which has authority over the town's financial management policies. The special town meetings begin at 6 p.m. at Manamoy Regional Middle School on Crowell Road. Project details. The town purchased the 7,200 square foot parcel, which has 200 feet of frontage on Mitchell River, for $810,000 at the 2014 annual town meeting. Plans to make improvements to serve both commercial and recreational boaters were developed over the next several years, finally winning approval of town officials in 2019. The initial work on the project involved dredging and construction of a new bulkhead. That work had been largely completed, and the work now underway at the site involves installing a riprap in front of the steel bulkhead. Stabilizing the site will provide a more organized traffic pattern and additional parking. Two phases of the project remain. First, new piers and floats will be installed to serve both recreational and commercial interests. The final phase, which will have the biggest visual impact on the area, will be relocation of the former Stage Island Coast Guard boathouse onto pilings along the southwest side of the property. The boathouse has been stored at Quincy Shipyard for the past several years after being removed from the property across Stage Harbor from Bridge Street to make way for residential home construction. The boathouse will be restored and renovated internally to house the town's shellfish upwelling system. The aging upweller at Old Mill Boatyard has exceeded its useful life and has limited capacity. According to town officials, the upweller plays a major role in maintaining the health of the town's shellfish resource, especially the quahog fishery. Over the past 5 years, the shellfish landings generated about $7.8 million in direct economic value. Last year, shellfish landings totaled $1.7 million. As envisioned inside the historic boathouse, the new upwellers will have expanded capacity to grow an additional 1 million quahogs annually. The water intake system will be integrated into the adjacent docks and away from boat washing and fueling. The current upwellers intake are close to those activities at Old Mill Boatyard, and they have adversely impacted the operation at times. There's no guarantee that won't happen to the new location, said Coastal Resources Director Ted Kean, given that the new site is next to a commercial marina. I can't sit here and say there would never be an issue if you have a major spill at the marine, Kean said at the recent meeting of the South Coastal Harbor Management Committee. You might have some problems, but we'll hopefully be on top of things and shut it down, but it's vastly improved over what we have now. Financial status. Officials say the $4 million is necessary to complete what is envisioned to be an $11 million project. The $11 million waterways infrastructure bond that failed at May's annual town meeting included $4.5 million for Bridge Street. The amount now being requested is slightly less after the bulkhead work came in at $400,000 below estimates, and the dredging work ended up $100,000 under budget. To date, close to $4 million has been spent. Of that total, $2 million came from the previous $11 million waterways infrastructure bond appropriation. Another $1.5 million came from outside sources, including State Seaport Economic Council and dredging grants. Anticipated expenditures to complete the project total $6 million. There is $2 million remaining from the previous Waterways Bond and Waterways Improvement Fund contributions, and $700,000 is available from community preservation funds, specifically for historic restoration of the boathouse. The money was previously approved by town meeting in two $350,000 allocations. That leaves a balance of $4 million, which is being sought at special town meeting. Having the appropriation in hand will qualify the project for additional grants, including a request for up to $1 million. Officials plan to file with the Seaport Economic Council. It's a board project, so there might be other grant opportunities that we fit into, said Shellfish Constable Renee Gagne. But until we get the money to complete the project, we can't look for other grants. Copies of Monday's special town meeting warrant can be found on the town's website, www.chatham-mass.gov. Childcare is available. In Town Hall action, Chatham, 21% vote in primary. Just under 21% of town's 6,143 registered voters cast ballot in last Tuesday's state primary, and the only contested race for the Republican nomination for Massachusetts Senator John Deaton beat out Robert J. Antonellis and Ian Kane. Riders Cove Respite is the new name for the Council on Aging's Adult Day program. According to the town, a number of names were proposed for the program, and the top 3 were voted on by town staff. The program will be offered starting later this fall at the Center for Active Living on Stony Hill Road. The health department will sponsor 2 drive-through vaccine clinics next month. On October 9th, the VNA of Cape Cod, along with the department, will offer COVID and flu vaccines at the Department of Public Works on Crowell Road from 10 a.m. to noon for those 6 months and older, and high-dose flu vaccine for those 65 and older. And on October 16th, a flu and COVID vaccine clinic will again be held at the DPW, but will be specifically for town employees and Monomoy school staff and families. Town Hall action in Harwich. Policy on grinder pumps. The Select Board is reviewing a draft policy to provide grinder pumps to properties where they are necessary for sewering. The design for the town wastewater collection system generally consists of gravity mains and service laterals, except in certain locations where individual low-pressure grinder pumps systems are required due to elevation differences. Where an LPGP system is specified for a single-family residential property or is otherwise recommended for installation, the town will provide one LPGP system per property at no charge to the property owner. The property owner will assume ownership of the system and will be solely responsible for the installation, operation, and maintenance and repair. The town has entered into an employment agreement with Eric Krishnerf, the newly appointed interim finance director. Krishnerf will assist the town in closing out the books for fiscal 2024, submit free cash for certification, coordinate the tax rate recap accounting, and respond to auditors and outside inquiries. Krishnerf will assist in the recruitment and transition to a new finance director and will be paid $48,000, $200 per hour for on-site work. In Orleans, good turnout in primary. Despite an uneventful ballot with no local contested races, 28% of registered voters in Orleans cast ballots in last week's state primary. Hadley Luddy garnered 1,089 votes in her bid as the Democratic candidate seeking election to state representative seat in the 4th Barnstable District, which is being vacated by longtime Representative Sarah Peake. Luddy is poised to run unopposed for the seat in the November general election. State Senator Julian Sear of Truro received 1,125 votes in his bid for re-election in November. On the Republican side of the race, Christopher Lanzon received 390 votes. 2 seats are up for grabs on the Barnstable County Board of Commissioners. Democratic incumbents Sheila Lyons and Mark Forrest garnered 1,033 and 897 votes, respectively. They'll be challenged by Republican Cynthia Steed, 294 votes, and Ronald Beatty, 284 votes. In the general election, U.S. Representative Bill Keating earned 1,132 votes in his bid for re-election in the state's 9th congressional district. On the Republican side, Dan Sullivan garnered 389 votes last week. U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren earned 1,127 votes in Orleans in her bid for another 6-term Republicans John Deaton and Robert Antonellis took 307 and 111 votes, respectively, in their bids for the seat. In Brewster Town Hall action, town lauded for budget. For the second consecutive year, the town of Brewster has received the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from the National Government Finance Officers Association. It is something we are proud of, Town Manager Peter Lombardi said Monday. It really means that our budget documents and the way in which that information and data is conveyed to our residents meets nationally recognized best practices. Lombardi thanked Assistant Town Manager Donna Kalanick and Finance Director Mimi Bernardo for their hard work. Select Board member Mary Chaffee congratulated the team for clearly explaining the town's annual spending plans. There are few things on earth that I think could be murkier than the municipal finance, she noted. Together with other towns in the Nauset Regional School District, Brewster is continuing its efforts to boost efficiency and spending on the town's 2 elementary schools as part of that effort. This is a reminder that this is Denise reading to you this week's edition of the Cape Cod Chronicle. It's time for the obituaries. Barbara Elizabeth Knapp. It is with heavy heart and profound sadness we announce the passing of Barbara Elizabeth Knapp of Eastham on July 14th at 71 years old after a long and courageous 18-year battle with cancer. Please join us to celebrate Barbara's life on Friday, September 13th, 2024 at 2 p.m. at the First Congregational Church at 200 Main Street in Wellfleet. In lieu of flowers, please make a donation in Barbara's memory to Helping Our Women, the Animal Rescue League of Brewster, and the Oncology Department at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. For online condolences, you can visit nickersonfunerals.com. The next obituary, John J. Nash, Sr. John J. Nash, Sr., aged 84 of Chatham, died peacefully surrounded by his family on Sunday, September 1st. Born in Port Chester, New York on July 4th, 1940, along with his identical twin, Michael, to Grace Shugru Nash and James F. Nash, Jr., John spent his formative years with Michael and elder siblings James and Barbara in New York. Shortly after marrying Midge and settling in White Plains, New York, John was drafted into the United States Army in 1966 and served until 1969, rising to the rank of first lieutenant. Following his service in the Army, John worked for many years at Chase Manhattan Bank in New York. A memorial mass for John will be celebrated on Saturday, November 16th at 11 a.m. at St. Patrick Roman Catholic Church, 85 Washington Avenue, Chatham. For online condolences, please visit nickersonfunerals.com. The next, Kathleen Marie Wall Barnes. Kathleen Marie Wall Barnes of Harwichport, Mass., formerly of Bar, Vermont, and Watertown, Cheshire, and Hebron, Connecticut, passed away peacefully on June 7, 2024, surrounded by loved ones. Kathleen was born to Franklin and Marie Wall on April 8, 1935, in Watertown, Connecticut, loving wife of Jack Barnes for 65 years, mother, grandmother, sister, and aunt. A celebration of life will be held at Nickerson Funeral Home, 87 Crowell Road, Chatham, on Saturday, September 28th at 3 p.m. Donations in Kathleen's memory, a way to honor her life and legacy, may be made to Cape Cod Alzheimer's Family Support Center in Brewster, or Association to Preserve Cape Cod, or Harwich Conservation Trust. For online condolences, please visit nickersonfunerals.com. The next, Robert Leonard Duarte. The family of Robert Leonard Duarte of Harwich is saddened to announce his passing on August 25th. He was a loving husband, father, and grandfather. He was born on June 29, 1940, to the late William S. Duarte Sr. and Emma Pierce Duarte in Dighton, Massachusetts. He worked for the Technor Apex Company for 38 years. A funeral mass will be held on October 26, 2024 at 10 a.m. at the Holy Trinity Catholic Church in Harwich, followed by a private burial in Rehoboth, Massachusetts. In lieu of flowers, please send donations to the American Cancer Society or the Jimmy Fund. The next, Eileen Belf Harringen. Eileen Belf Harringen was born in Beacon, New York on July 22, 1927, to the late Anne Keating Belf and John Thomas Belf. She was the eldest of 4 daughters, and she was predeceased by her 3 sisters. The family resided in Mount Vernon, New York. Eileen married Francis J. Harringen, who survives her on April 17, 1956. Condolence messages may be made at www.grahamfuneralhome.com. The next, Joseph Albert McCraw. Joseph Albert McCraw, born February 2, 1940 in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, died on Friday, August 30th at his home in Harwich. He was the owner of Flowers by Bar Bloom in Attleboro. He is survived by his wife of 63 years, Linda Bar Bloom McCraw. He will be truly missed. Services will be private. The next, Anne Elizabeth Flynn, 1947 to 2024. Anne Flynn of Harwichport, Massachusetts, was born in Albany, New York on November 26th and passed away peacefully in her sleep on Cape Cod, September 6, 2024, after a long battle with Alzheimer's. The courage of a disease first claimed her mind and then slowly her life. The next, Thomas M. Kernan, 67. Thomas, best known as Tommy Jones, passed away unexpectedly from heart failure while visiting a close friend in Florida on August 29th. Tommy was born July 23, 1957 in Connecticut, where he spent his youth. In his teenage years, he entered the Navy during the Vietnam War. Tommy's passion for music led him to travel the country following the Grateful Dead for many years. There will be a private celebration of life on September 21st. Back to our stories. Chatham police now sport body cameras. Cruisers also equipped with video recorders. By Tim Wood, Chatham. Even though they've only been in use since August 28th, new police body and dashboard cameras have already been a factor in several cases. We've already had a couple of cases where we've been able to collect evidence through the cameras that we would not have before, said Chief Michael Anderson. They're already showing their value. The department purchased 22 forward-facing Motorola body cameras, 1 for each sworn officer, as well as 6 dashboard-mounted cameras for the department's marked cruisers. The devices cost less than $150,000 appropriation, leaving some funds left over should cameras be needed, he said. Body cameras are not new to policing, but departments have been slow to adopt them, Anderson said. He's been advocating for them since he became chief. It was a priority, he said. The cameras are simple to use. While always passively on, they don't start recording until an officer taps on the front panel. The recorded footage jumps back 1 minute from the tap so that what led up to the officer turning on the camera is also captured. The cameras in the cruisers can be activated manually and turn on automatically when the flashing lights are switched on. The footage is retained for a minimum of 180 days, longer for serious incidents as spelled out by state record retention laws. The video can be used in court cases and for training and can be obtained by the public through public record requests, subject to the same restrictions as applied to police reports, according to Anderson. Included software also allows redaction such as blurring faces and bleeping audio on video released publicity. We do have the ability to redact and protect people's privacy. According to the department's policy, officers should inform the public when they are being recorded. However, people interacting with the police during a service call or traffic stop should assume they are being recorded. The video is essentially supplement to the reports police must fill out for every incident. This helps fill in the blanks, said Officer Clint Collier. He said adopting the camera was an easy transition. He wore a similar body cam in the Coast Guard for 11 years. A lot of members of the public assumed we had them already. Officers have discretion on when to activate the camera, which records high-definition video and audio. It essentially is a safety tool, Anderson said, for both police and the public. If anything, they've been more calm because they know our interactions are being recorded. Given the amount of equipment officers carry, the cameras are barely noticeable. You don't feel the weight of it. It is in no way impedes anyone from doing their job. The camera strengthens either decisions I make or decisions I decide to make, he said. I'm pretty excited to start using it. It's like catching up to everyone else. A set of frequently asked questions about the camera is available on the department's webpage. Neighbors object to scallop agriculture in Herring River by William F. Galvin, Harwich. Jeffrey Lang and Sandra Wycott want to grow scallops in Herring River from docks off the front of their property, but there are objections from neighbors who are concerned about impacts on the boat channel and the commercialization of the river. Lang has been growing scallops on an experimental basis over the past couple of years under his dock on his property further up the river. He purchased a property closer to the mouth of the river off Riverbend Road and filed a notice of intent with the Conservation Commission to place docks off the bulkhead from which where wire mesh cages could be submerged to grow scallops. But neighbors have made their opposition to the project clear. In a statement of opposition, Noreen Calhoun said community members strongly object to the proposed commercial operation, not only because of the negative impact to the surrounding area, but because of adverse impacts to protected wetland resources and recreational activities in the river. The proposal would allow privatization of the Herring River for one person's commercial gain. Lang said false stories are being told to the neighbors, including plans to build a commercial agriculture hatchery with trucks going in and out, and that the plan is open to a waterfront restaurant off the small lane off Riverside Drive. Not in my backyard has become a force against agriculture on the Cape, Lang said. Lang is associated with the Scallop Bay Shellfish Company, which has a hatchery in Pocasset, where he said most neighbors can't tell we have a holding area there. It's quiet and does not distract our neighbors. Lang is proposing to move a deteriorated bulkhead on his property and construct a new one back 4 to 6 feet along the river. The bulkhead is failing and the salt marsh is behind it, which has created dredge materials in the 1950s, is eroding. Lang wants to place a steel bulkhead against the edge of the marsh and add docks on the outside from which the mesh cages holding scallops seed will be submerged. The project calls for 250 cubic yards of dredging along the bulkhead to create a 6-foot depth at low tide. Lang said the project will not impact the boating channel in the river, and it might even widen it a bit. The project calls for floats totaling 436 square feet. Calhoun said Lang's request will require a lot of variances. Resident Beth Larson wanted to know if the town of Harwich has a plan to commercialize the Herring River. No, said the Conservation Administrator Amy Uzowski. The Commission agreed to continue the hearing to its first session in October. The Commission and Waterways Committee assessments are early in their permitting process. Uzowski said adding that changes to the state Chapter 91 license for waterway structure will be necessary along the water quality permits. The Select Board will also have to issue an agriculture permit. Reviews by the Army Corps of Engineers and the Massachusetts Coastal Zone Management will be required. Harwich Cranberry Festival gets underway Saturday. Harwich. It's festival time. The Harwich Cranberry Arts and Music Festival gets underway behind the Community Center on Oak Street on Saturday morning. The festival has been the centerpiece of the September activities in town for nearly 50 years. This year will be no different. With 150 crafts, vendors, food, music, and drink, the two-day festival promises to provide offerings for a wide range of interests. The crafts fair hours are 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, with some vendors remaining open to the end of Cran Jam Music Festival at 6 p.m. on Saturday. The Cran Jam Festival features several Cape and Islands-based bands on Saturday and Sunday. The music starts at noon on Saturday and Sunday. See page 42 for a full lineup of acts. A full schedule of events can be found in the second summer supplement in this edition. Celebrate Our Waters returns for 13th year. Orleans. For more than 20 years, the Orleans Pond Coalition has dedicated itself to educating people on the importance of protecting the town's waterways, but the nonprofit's mission comes to life every year in September. Celebrate Our Waters, the coalition's flagship event, rallies the community together around the goal of environmental stewardship through 3 days of events and initiatives. This year's 13th annual event kicks off Friday, with events scheduled throughout the remainder of the weekend. On Friday, residents and visitors can partake in a free tour of the town's wastewater treatment facility on Overland Way from 3 to 5 p.m. People can check out the facility, which first went online in March 2023. Other free events planned throughout the weekend include yoga on the beach, bike rides, bird walks, tours of the Putnam Farm wetland restoration and local cranberry bog, hikes, environmental discussions, and an art reception at the Addison Gallery. There also will be a free concert and bonfire Saturday night at Nauset Beach. This year's Family Fun tent at Rock Harbor will offer games and events for children of all ages, including a scavenger hunt, music puppets, t-shirts, shell paintings, and environmental education. The Coalition stages the annual 3-day event in partnership with the town of Orleans. Funding comes by way of membership donations as well as those from local community groups and organizations. Read more about Celebrate Our Waters in the second summer supplement in this edition. Were liquor license regulations violated? Town weighs in July 6th incident at the port by William F. Galvin, Harwich. The town is weighing in whether any liquor license regulations were violated on July 6th when members of the police department sought assistance to deal with a large crowd milling around in front of Port Restaurant and Bar shortly after closing. Town Administrator Joseph Powers, acting as hearing officer for the Select Board, conducted a 2-hour show cause hearing on September 5th based on the police report submitted by Lieutenant Aram Goshingarian. In the report, he wrote that he did not see security outside as is required under the liquor's license, so he went to the door of the restaurant, which was locked. Through the window of the door, he saw a male wearing a port polo shirt. Goshgarian asked the person to open the door because he needed staff security help with the crowd on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, but the staff member refused. Goshgarian explained the need for assistance managing the crowd, but again the staff member refused. The staff member identified as Hunter Brackett asked Goshgarian if the officer had a problem with him, and he said the sidewalk was public property, and that's what the 20 cops out front are for. Goshgarian wrote that it was just Detective Robert Brackett and himself outside trying to control the crowd. At issue in the show cause hearing were possible violations of 3 provisions of the town's liquor regulations, one relating to licenses ensuring the patrons leave the premises in an orderly manner, and that if needed, security be hired to ensure order. A second provision allows the Select Board or duty authorized agents, including police, immediate entrance to the premises and any hindrance or delay inspection caused by employees shall be cause for action against the licensee. And finally, the license requires cooperation with town agents, including police officers, in their investigation or inspection of licensed premises. From the onset of the hearing, the attorneys representing the port, Conrad Blutzer and Dina B. Browns of Blutzer and Blutzer, apologized for the actions by Hunter Brackett, the bartender at the door, when Goshgarian sought entrance. It was disrespectful and it should not have happened, Blutzer said. But the port's attorney said the manager, Patrick Connolly, responded to Goshgarian, opening the door and apologizing to the officer. Several members of the restaurant security staff joined the officers in resolving safety concerns as the crowd was leaving the congregating a few feet on Route 28 while Uber transports were pulling up to the curb and picking up clients. According to the police, the person that denied Goshgarian entry into the restaurant came outside and had a conversation with security staff, and everyone went back inside. The crowd was significantly smaller by that time, but there were 0 port employees outside. In defense of the port's action, Blutzer said the staff is told to lock the door when patrons leave so that people do not wander back into the restaurant. That's normal procedure. Brown said employees have been told to get the manager if there is a problem, and that is what Brackett did. She said video showed Connolly was at the door in 30 seconds, and 30 seconds after that, the security staff were outside. When Connolly testifies, Powers took the time to thank the manager for doing the right thing when responding to the officer. Powers took issue with the absence of Hunter Brackett from the hearing. Justin Brackett said Hunter was in college. Connolly said he did not recall whether there was security on the sidewalk before Goshgarian made the request. Security monitors the doors at closing to make sure no one leaves taking a drink, and they tell people to stay off and out of the road when departing, he said. Both Connolly and Brown emphasized the crowd that gathered outside the restaurant was not all port patrons, but also included people coming from Perks next door, 3 Monkeys, Mad Minnow, and the Hot Stove to get the parking lot off C Street. Connolly also said all patrons leave by the front door facing Route 28 because the police department does not want people exiting by the back door onto C Street to reduce neighborhood disturbances. Our security has no problem telling people to keep moving, said Connolly. Powers said the select board had the ultimate authority in the matter, and he is charged with making recommendations to the board. He said he didn't see any violations relating to leaving in an orderly manner, and he had praised the manager for his cooperation with police. But the town's legal counsel, Jeffrey Blake, took issue with whether Hunter Brackett had cooperated with the police. Blitzer said Goshgarian testified that the delay was a short period of time, assessing it was less than 30 seconds. Brackett was uncomfortable and did not know how to handle a response to the officer, he said. If it weren't for the interaction from Hunter, we wouldn't be here today, Blitzer said. The attorney asked Powers to recommend to the select board that there were no violations. Given the use of the terms hindrance and delay, Powers wanted to know the definition of delay and whether there was a case law relative to the term. Only the select board can render decisions of this nature, said Powers. Should Powers find violations occurred, the select board will conduct a public hearing. We've reached the end of this week's reading of the Cape Cod Chronicle, dated Thursday, September 12th, 2024. Have a great week.